Hi everyone, my name is Harshdeep. I am a second year student at university, and I'm also the director of CLAIR Voices. Today, myself, Rachel, and Yara will be interviewing Christine from the Refugee and Immigrant Services Program, and we will be discussing the program as well as how it meets the needs of refugee and immigrant communities. The purpose of CLAIR Voices is to educate ourselves and our audience regarding refugee and immigrant issues through hearing the firsthand experiences of affiliated personnel and to express our appreciation towards the works of those centers and the people involved in the programs. Also, CLAIR Voices branches off from Project CLAIR, which is a government-registered nonprofit that aids refugees and immigrants in providing free English education by matching tutors based on the immigrants or refugees' native language. Currently, we have around 200 tutors that speak over 30 languages such as French, Spanish, and Hindi. Now that I've introduced our purpose, Rachel and then Yara, would you like to introduce yourselves?
I'm Rachel. I'm a high school student. I'm now with the Project CLAIR interview project, and previously I was with the Project CLAIR curriculum development team.
Hi guys, my name is Yara. I'm a student at the University of Oregon, majoring in general science. I am an Arabic translator for the Claire Stone podcast, and I'm also part of the interview project.
And Christine, could you introduce yourself as well as provide an overview of the Refugee and Immigrant Services Program, such as the services it offers?
Sure. My name is Christine Zeller-Powell, and I work with the Catholic Community Services Refugee and Immigrant Services Program. And so that program has three main areas. We have a contract to do refugee resettlement, which is part of the United States Refugee Admissions Program. And then we also have a privately funded program, private and grant funded program that serves asylum seekers. That's the Asylum Seekers Assistance Project. And then we also have an immigration legal services program, which is in collaboration with Catholic Charities Immigration Legal Services Program out of Portland. The Immigration Legal Services Program provides immigration attorneys, low-cost immigration attorneys to low-income folks in Lane County. And then the Refugee Resettlement and Asylum Seekers Assistance programs provide similar services. So basic sort of resettlement services. So for refugees arriving, that would be helping them get their Social Security card and helping them find work and a place to live, furnish their apartment, connect with language resources. Hopefully if they can swing it financially, enroll in English classes, get their kids registered in school, all of those things. And so then we also try to do that for asylum seekers, which unfortunately can't be served under the Refugee Resettlement Program. So try to do similar services for asylum seekers.
I feel like your program offers such a wide range of services that are necessary and key for these communities. So as a whole, what initiated the development of the Refugee and Immigrant Services Program?
What initiated the development?
Mm-hmm.
So it started in 2016. There was a whole group of people around Eugene Springfield that wanted to resettle refugees in Eugene Springfield. And because we are more than 100 miles outside of Portland, there are refugee resettlement agencies up in Portland, but we are more than 100 miles outside of that circle. And so they couldn't resettle refugees here. We had to have our own contract. So those folks who were interested in supporting this work came together and eventually formed the Refugee Resettlement Coalition of Lane County, which is an awesome group of volunteers who continue to support the work of RISP. And they approached Catholic Community Services because those contracts for refugee resettlement are mostly, they're private public partnerships between mostly faith-based groups, actually. And so Catholic Community Services was able to have a contract through the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, Migration and Refugee Services Program. And so that's how that got started. And then we resettled our first family in September of 2016. Then the election, it became very apparent that the past administration was not going to support the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program. And so we didn't expect to really be resettling very many refugees through that program after that. So our goal was to stay alive and stay active, so that when the administration changed, we would be ready to start that work again. So we actually were able to resettle 9 individual refugees, which is not a lot, but that's more than we would have resettled without that contract, I guess. And then because this group of people wanted to help refugees or people fleeing persecution, we realized that asylum seekers are basically in the same situation, fleeing the same kinds of persecution. And so that's when we developed the Asylum Seekers Assistance Program. And that started as a pilot project, completely volunteer-led. And then eventually we were able to do enough fundraising, and Catholic Community Services made it a program of theirs. So that's the history.
Thank you. So how vital are communication skills to immigrant and refugee success? And what are the most important areas of language skills to develop for professional success in English-speaking places?
Yeah, so I think what we see is, the reality is that refugees or asylum seekers, everybody needs to be move towards self-sufficiency as quickly as they can, because we generally don't have a lot of social programs that would really provide a long-term support, except in sort of cases of disability or things like that. So it's really important for refugees and asylum seekers, immigrants, to learn English so that they can get jobs. We've really seen that as a something that can be really restricting, really restrict their ability to get jobs. It just limits the kinds of work and the places of the actual places of employment in Eugene Springfield that can hire people. So, there are more options for folks who speak Spanish and not English than there would be for people who speak other languages from around the world and know English. So, did that answer your question, or was there a second part?
Yes, that answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah, so this kind of goes off from the last question, but when supporting people who have significantly different backgrounds, values, goals, and cultures, how do you go about approaching these differences and provide the best assistance?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, one thing I have noticed doing this work over the past several years is there's just a really huge range of people, people's backgrounds, in terms of their education level or their even their social status, where they came from, and how that impacts where they see themselves here now that they're in the United States. What we try to do is we try to approach each person as an individual, and recognize and respect their dignity as a human being, and go from there. We do what we can. We try to follow the client's lead. So we try to work on what they want help with instead of what we think they need help with. And we also try to, as much as we can, we try to work in I think for social services, we try to work on a really long time scale, because the immigration process is a really long time scale, and acclimating to a new country is a really long process. And so we've actually been able to stay involved with some families for multiple years. And so you can really, over that course of time, you can work on different things. They're ready to work on different things and ask for different kinds of help.
So can you describe the process of finding work or a job as an immigrant or refugee new to a country?
Yeah, so the first big hurdle is getting work authorization. And if you have work authorization, then that's going to look like that process of finding work looks really different from not having work authorization. Basically, if you don't have work authorization, then I think, finding the best way to find a job is to find other recent immigrants and network through them to find work. And that's not really something Catholic Community Services can take on, because we get in sort of sticky legal territory if we're helping people who don't have work authorization find work. So that's challenging. Then if you get work authorization, ideally, so refugees, when refugees arrive, they are work authorized. They are work authorized. So that is huge. Like that makes the whole process just much easier. And so ideally we would get people in English language classes for, a minimum of a semester of a term, but ideally as long as we can before they financially have to work. And again, if they come through the refugee admissions program, they have a little bit of I'm not going to call it a nest egg, but they get, it's like $1,100 per family member and a cash payment when they arrive. So that can, if you got a family of 4 or whatever, that can you can get a few months of rent out of that. And if we can fundraise some more money, that can allow people to be in language classes for a while, because the longer they stay in the language classes, the more English they can speak, the more choices they have for jobs. And then for finding work, we do 2 things. We do a variety of things. So we do have an employment resources team of volunteers who will help people put together resumes, which can be a little tricky for somebody who hasn't had a lot of work experience in the United States. And then they can also practice interviewing, talk about that whole process. And then the volunteers also network. So we've had some businesses in Eugene Springfield approach us and say they would like to hire refugees, which is awesome. Refugees or immigrants. And so like Yogi Tea is one of them. There's some other largely food manufacturing businesses, which is something I guess we have a lot of here. And you don't have to have a whole lot of English to do that work. It's kind of assembly line factory kind of work, and decent employers. So that's been good. The other thing folks can do is they can access some of the employment services here. So there's Workforce Lane, which is basically the State of Oregon Employment Office in Lane County, and they can help people connect with jobs. We've had some success there connecting people with sort of very entry level health services work, like being in-home care, health care provider, or we haven't yet had somebody be willing to do the CNA training, but there's some opportunities there. Or then the other option is Easter Seals has a community, I can't quite remember the full name, but it's a community connecting communities, I think, program. And they actually have the contract through vocational rehab to provide Spanish language voc rehab services to people looking for jobs. So we've had some success with clients who really struggled finding work, have been able to find work through that program, but it's not a fast process, and you have to either have been granted asylum. No, actually, you just have to have work authorization. So it could be an option for either asylum seekers, asylees, or refugees. So that was a long answer.
Oh, thank you.
No, that's okay. So you might have. Oh, I'm sorry. Is someone saying something?
No, I just said
Hello?
thank you.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry, I got lagged a little bit. But so you might have mentioned this while you're talking about the process, but during this process, what is the hardest aspect or the hardest part that most people wouldn't consider?
Well, I think one thing people don't consider unless they've walked through the process themselves or accompanied someone through the process is just how complicated it is. And I think that can be said of people trying to navigate low-income services in general, services for low-income folks in general. But when you add like the immigration piece on top of that, it can just be really complicated to try and figure out the services, especially, if you have a child with a disability or something, then you're just layering on layer upon layer of complications. So I think sometimes people don't think about that. And I'm not sure. non-immigrants. So one of the things I'm not sure how much non-immigrants realize the connections people maintain with their family and friends back home, and just sort of the weight of worrying about, they see in the news there's been a bombing or an attack, and just the weight and the constant worry that just remains, even though they that themselves are in a place of safety. They continue to worry about family and friends.
Yeah, I feel like there's probably a lot of like pressure and like tension and like associated with like transitioning from one country to the other, while like also like trying to like, I guess, like accommodate for like your new country of residence. So like thinking about the past as well as the present. But for individuals that might like be living in more rural areas, how would you recommend they contact and reach out to services like yours?
That's a good question. I mean, that is one thing that's been really challenging about the pandemic, because it does seem like a lot of our clients have in the past have liked to come in person to meet, and that hasn't been something we've been able to do. But I think with children doing the online schooling, that has actually resulted in a lot more families having access to online services, and being able to, if not email, being able to text or do a Zoom call, that kind of thing. I think the way we get most connected with people in rural areas is through word of mouth, either through somebody telling their friend, hey, you can get a free immigration consult with this immigration legal services program, or teachers and other service providers in rural areas connecting people with us.
So what resources, aside from language assistance, are the most helpful for immigrants and refugee populations that can be provided on a wider scale?
Well, I think more low-income housing support would be huge. That's a big problem. It doesn't affect just the immigrant population, obviously, but I see that as a real barrier to welcoming more refugees and immigrants in our community.
Absolutely. So you talked about a little bit of the last presidential election and the term, and something I wanted to talk about was, when facing the current status of the country's strong stance against immigration, what do you think is the best way to show different perspectives and convince people otherwise?
Well, I think that, so when we haven't done interviews lately so much, but back when we started our program, we were in the news a lot, and we were doing a number of interviews. And one of the questions that always comes up is, well, we should take care of our homeless veterans and homeless families first before we go welcoming other folks to our community. And I think I think the response is, for us, we said, well, we should do both. Like, there's no reason to not be doing both. And Catholic Community Services is an organization that does both. And so I think that we have, I think that it should mean something when we say, as an organization that serves low-income people in our community, that we can do both, that we've thought about it, and practically speaking, we are doing both. I also think that people need to recognize that it doesn't make any sense to compare the homeless folks that are living under the Washington Jefferson Street Bridge to the homeless families that are coming to our borders, because if our society fell apart here in Lane County, and people are fleeing, the homeless folks under the Washington Jefferson Street Bridge are probably not going to flee, because they're probably not together enough to be able to do that. Like, the people who are able to cross borders and come to a new country and have the the stamina and the wherewithal to figure that out, those are amazing folks. Like, we should be welcoming them and helping them get on their feet, because once they get on their feet, they're gonna they have amazing things to contribute.
absolutely agree with you. And I just had another question. And it's just like, how has the evolution of immigration laws affected your work and efforts for these people?
Yeah, so I mean, I've only been doing this work since 2016. I started as a volunteer, and then I was hired in 2018, I think. So I mean, the years of the Trump administration were pretty crazy because the rules just kept changing all the time. And now, since the Biden administration, the rules are also changing all the time, but they're changing, I think, for the better. So that's been nice, but it makes it hard to plan. Yeah, and hard to advise people. So I hope that we can reach a place of some, I hope we can pass comprehensive immigration reform, though I don't know that Congress will do that. And then I hope that we can just create a more, a less political refugee admissions system. And there are some proposals for doing that because right now, the way the system's set up, the president gets to set the number of refugees, the ceiling for the number of refugees that come in under the U.S. refugee admissions program. And one thought is that Congress would actually set a floor so that we wouldn't see a decimation of the system like we saw in the last 4 years. So I think that would really help for that program. But then I think also we need to fund the asylum processing system in a way that would anticipate future surges at the southern border like we've seen recently, because I think with the global situation and climate change, I don't think those surges are going to go away. So we need to prepare better.
And because like the program has been like going on for like multiple years, I was wondering if there's a certain situation or instance that has stuck with you throughout your employment.
Well, I mean, there are a lot. I think one of the really one of the early events that has stuck with me are the airport arrivals. So these have been for refugee families. So when families are assigned to us through the refugee admissions program, our program has a U.S. tie component. So that means that there has to be someone in our area that is the U.S. tie, and can be a family member or a friend or even barely an acquaintance, actually. But at any rate, they're coming here to meet somebody, and so we've had kind of celebrations at the airport when people have landed with balloons and flowers and a quick kind of crowd to welcome people before they go off with their family, and those moments have just been so full of joy and happiness, and families should be together, and so to be able to play some small part in making that happen that's awesome, and I'm hoping we get to do more of that in the coming years.
All right, well, thank you so much. That concludes our interview, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us, and I've learned so much, so this is a great way to learn more about the process of immigration and hopefully get more attention and awareness for your program.
That'd be wonderful. Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed talking to you ladies, and it sounds like you have an interesting program too with the online tutoring. So it'd be nice to know more about that as well.
Yep, we can for sure send like resources and like links for the program to you. And we also like offer free tutoring. So if any of your clients are interested, they can reach out for sure.
Okay, awesome. That would be good to know about.